everybody, and welcome to day 8 of our holiday event, 12 Days of Holiday Self-Care. Today, we're going to be talking about stressing less and dive into some tools to help handle those holiday pressures and coping skills around stress. So today we have Whitney Kennelly with us. I'm so happy to have you here. She is one of our social work students, Master of Social Work students at U of M that is working with us until April. So excited to have your expertise on the call today about managing stress. So thank you everybody for joining us for our holiday series. We know that the holidays, even though they're joyful or supposed to be joyful, they can bring a lot of stress and overwhelming schedules, overstimulating environments, and high expectations. And it's easy to feel like you might be pulled in many different directions. So today we're going to focus on some practical ways to identify holiday stress and triggers, how to respond with maybe calm and confidence if possible. So let's kind of get into some of these topics that we have prepared for you today. Whitney, I'm going to dive into asking you some questions and figure out maybe some tips that you have for us for how you support people when it comes to stress. So what would you say some of the most common sources of holiday stress are, and why do you think people feel overwhelmed during this season?
Yeah, that's such a good question, Susan. Thank you. So I can speak for myself and just for clients that I work with. I think it's a lot about expectations at gatherings, especially if you have a lot of them too. I know that can really pile up stress. It's like, yeah, maybe one or two gatherings is cup filling, but maybe eight starts to drain. So I know maybe it's like that social exhaustion. Maybe there's that aunt that you don't want to see. So there again, there's like just connection can be good. Sometimes when we overfill our cups, I hear that that's can cause a lot of stress too.
Is it possible that we would have stress if we don't maybe even have a lot on the go?
Oh, yes. Yeah, totally. That's another good point too. It's stressful being at home alone, when you don't have a lot of things to attend to as well. The isolation can be hard. That's another form of stress too. It can show up as loneliness during the holiday season. Even some people find that the eating food can be stressful too. Yeah, there's a lot that can with too much or too little. That's a really good point.
I find that no matter how much I prepare for the holiday season, like having all my Christmas shopping done by
Yes.
November 30th, like with Black Friday and all the cyber sales, it's like we're done. I feel like then the stress is like, did I get enough? Did I
Mm.
remember to get this? And it's like no matter what I try, I think that stress will still kind of show up. Um, and it's more about maybe managing it and seeing where it's showing up and not necessarily stressing more because of it, being kind to yourself and letting things kind of go and know that you don't have to be perfect, especially if you maybe miss a gift here or there. Um, so yeah, I think the stress, it's just sometimes for people a stressful time of year.
Yeah, and I think what you're naming, Susan, too, is the anticipatory stress, which I should have mentioned too. It's like, yeah, like the preparation, even for the food. I
Mhm.
know some clients have some really awesome skills in terms of like doing one thing at a time, but I guess we'll get to that during what to do. But yeah, it's that into anticipatory. Did I do enough? Did I prepare enough? Do I have everything I need? Even just that can tax our nervous system in quite a big way.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So when we think about how to navigate this stress, maybe anticipatory stress, just stress that's kind of everywhere, what are some practical tools or techniques or skills that people can use to maybe manage those expectations that they might have, whether it's around like friends or family, all of those things that come up around the holiday season?
I think like checking in with yourself is super important, and a practice even besides the holidays is a good one. That way, it's kind of like if you're going out to an event, you can just know how to take care of yourself a little bit that like better. If you're going with a full cup or an empty cup, that's going to change how maybe you want to engage, how long you want to stay, all of those choices that you can make before you even get there to know what you need. Sometimes when we get so busy during the holiday season, it's like you're just going, going, going. And then as you're doing that, we stop checking in and notice that our stress is so high. So, again, checking in first. That way you can make decisions and give yourself some space. I think another thing too is if you're hosting or you have a lot to do shopping wise, really breaking things down into manageable steps. So, if we can, instead of making the whole holiday dinner on one go, maybe there's like little pieces you could do before that maybe make it a little bit easier on that day for you. So yeah, breaking small tasks apart. And also just, I think a really beautiful tool is like lowering expectations, which is really hard to do too. We want to have a perfect everything, but perfect just doesn't exist. And actually, like chasing that is adding to our stress. So rather maybe thinking about it as lowering our goals, maybe that's, I assembled everyone together and I showed up and that was the win, right? Maybe the turkey was dry. We can just kind of go over that one. It's not part of your goal. We assembled and we gathered. So, yeah, lowering our goals, checking in with ourselves. And I think just having self compassion is really huge. It's like we're not going to show up perfectly at every gathering. Maybe you're tired. Having self compassion if you don't have anywhere to go to, right? As you mentioned, it's like, yeah, I am still loved and valuable, even if there's nowhere to go for me. So, again, it's I think self-compassion during the holiday season is such a lifesaver.
When I think about even just the holiday dinner or the events, the things that you have to do, I liked that idea of kind of like breaking things up. And I already have, so we're hosting, and I've already broken up the preliminary house clean
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
to like that's where it starts for me. And so with having two kids, I'm already starting to think about the things that I want more of a deep clean with versus kind of light clean. And we'll be tasking that at least 3 or 4 days in advance, so that it doesn't feel overwhelming for them, and it doesn't feel like you're
That's
like
awesome.
cleaning, and then having to cook. Is just, breaking it down into smaller tasks. And then when it comes to preparing the dinner, I was just having this conversation with my walking friend yesterday. And like we agreed that if you're hosting, there's so many like sneaky things that you can do that nobody needs to know. Like you can cook the ham the day before, slice it all up, and put it in a roasting tray, and then in the fridge. And then when it's, an hour or so before, you can put it in the oven to warm up. You could have things like your gravy already made the day before. Think about what are the essential things that might have to be cooked on the day of, and just leave those. Prep up everything else a couple of days in advance. A lot of things can be cooked and frozen and held. And if you have that expectation, like, no, everything has to be from scratch the day of, okay, but maybe we have to enlist help. Maybe we have to delegate a little bit more to make sure that those expectations or those desires can be met. Shortcuts, I would say, are a lifesaver, and if you can find them, use them. That it's not a bad thing around the holiday season. So, yeah, just to kind of add to that, I guess, gathering stress, how to navigate that. Another topic that I think is important around how to keep your stress levels down is prioritizing your commitments. I think we want to say yes to everything and be everything to everyone. The holidays can feel like a balancing act. And I'm going to say, like, I hear this from other people. I don't think that my world is quite as busy as others, but I hear people having like endless demands, people being pulled in multiple different directions, especially if they have more than a few kids and their activities. So really thinking about prioritizing what truly matters can help reduce with that overstimulation and prevent burnout. Because the last thing we want is after the holiday seasons to need like a holiday from your holiday. So I think not every task or event deserves equal weight.
Mm.
So if you've had like I don't know, and I explain this to my kids, like you have close friends and you have acquaintances, and if we give equal weight to both, like it's really hard to manage. So thinking about like with those events that maybe it's just acquaintances or people that are in your circle but not really close friends, like do you have the energy and the time to provide the same amount of attention to those events or commitments as you would to the ones that really align with your values and well-being? um, so yeah, recognizing that not every event you have to attend. You have to attend for the length of time it's being hosted. You can show up, say hi, head out, and you don't necessarily have to keep them all the same level of value. What do you have to, when you think about things, Whitney, what sort of around prioritizing commitments would you say kind of is a aspect that resonates with you?
Hmm. I would say just having boundaries, and I'm very attuned with my capacity. So I say no, which was hard to do. So I'm not saying that skill is available and in reach. I think everyone can say no. It's just very difficult. But I am one of those people at the end of the holiday where yeah, you only have a few weeks off, and I was like, wow, I need a vacation from this vacation, and I have to go back to work. So
Mhm.
with that, it's like, yeah, prioritizing rest. Like, rest is important too this holiday, and rest can be with family. So again, I think I'm very comfortable taking time for myself now when I know I can't show up in the way I need to. But yeah, no is hard, and especially like a holiday giving, right? But think about giving to yourself. That's what I try to think too.
Hmm. So, a tip that maybe people can use is what's called the must, should, could
Mm,
approach. So, if we think about the musts, these are the essential commitments that um, can't do or don't want to avoid. So, like a work deadline, or like a mandatory holiday party, or even like a cherished tradition that you don't want to let pass. Like you're going to put those higher up. And then maybe the shoulds might be obligations that you feel pressured to fulfill, but might not truly need. It might be like a distant relatives gathering of sorts. And then the coulds, so optional activities that might bring joy but aren't essential, like baking extra holiday treats. Really take a look at all the things that you're put as top priority, and then break them down into the must, shoulds, and coulds, and manage your commitments that way. If we limit our musts and we reevaluate our shoulds and focus on the coulds, that might actually genuinely bring comfort or happiness. So it's a kind of way I like to delegate some of the things I have on my go, but it really helps me reclaim any time or energy that I have for focusing on what really truly matters. Yeah, so it's a hard thing. It's back to
yeah.
saying no. I don't
Yes.
necessarily want to do that. What about noticing stress around sensory overload? And
Mm,
I know we talk a little bit about this with Kelsey, our OT, but sometimes there's a lot of sensory input that's happening in our environment around the holiday season that adds maybe an internalized stress, and we don't necessarily know what's coming up. It's like, I'm frazzled,
mm,
is a term that I like to use because I'm not maybe necessarily stressed, but I'm feeling frazzled. But what do you have
mm.
to say about managing sensory overload?
Yeah. I think those key things mentioned earlier are so pivotal for like just regulating ourselves. I think that's what we're talking about is it's easy to like when it's not an event that has happened, but like a series of small like things kind of gnawing at you, and then you're like, whoa, why do I feel weird? That's why, because it's like the sensory input is lifting, 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 and it is hard to point because it's like, oh, I was in a room and people were talking too loud for a couple hours, right? Like that's not a huge event in our nervous system, but it wears at us. So again, I think checking in with that, knowing what your triggers are too. It's like, okay,
Mhm.
I know loud rooms bother me, and being in a room with like a lot of people. I would even say I avoid certain sensory input, but not an avoidance in a way that like I think it's like a self choice. It's like, okay, I can engage with this person one on one at a different event rather than showing up with 100 people, right? I know that's like not going to put me in, I guess that's one of the shoulds that I would just kind of swat away. So again, it's okay to say, this is a trigger for me and it doesn't feel good in my body when I'm around so
Mhm.
many people. And then making the choice for yourself. Or if it's one of those have tos, and you can't get away from that, it's like, what are ways that you can give yourself little breaks throughout that event? Or maybe that looks like, okay, is there a quiet room I can go into? Can I step outside for a little bit? Is there a dog I can play with? Um, can I limit how long I stay there, right? It's like showing up is huge, even if it's for 30 minutes, whatever that looks like for you. Again, the holiday season gathering and like just showing up is so huge that you can make those choices with the time commitment too. Yeah, I would say it's like checking in, knowing your triggers, and making space for how are you going to fill your cup back? Because again, those are very real stressors, and it's like chiseling away and taking from your cup. So again, I would invite people to think, how are you going to fill that back up? Is it taking a really long nap? Is it listening to music? Is it dancing outside? Everyone's so different. So knowing what fills your cup and what takes away from it, and then making choices accordingly.
I think those are great ideas. And if sensory overload is a challenge for you, I think even our suggestions are maybe what works for us, right? You have to
Yeah.
really recognize what works for you, and then that's going to be your toolkit. So there's lots of ideas, but figuring out what works for you. I know sometimes for me, I've caught myself. Going to the kitchen to do the dishes because like nobody
Mhm.
wants to do that and you're by yourself and you can just like like no
Yeah.
demands, just the dishes, right? So people will be like, oh, can I help you? I'm like, no, I'm good. So yeah, find out on sometimes I would go, and if the kids are playing in their room, like go and hang out with the kids for a little bit just
Nice.
to change things up. And find out what kind of works for you. I think maybe the last one that we'll talk about is when we think about holiday stress. I often hear the recommendation of like, well, exercise can reduce
Mhm.
stress. You should go exercise. But I think sometimes this maybe pressure to think that we have to move our body because exercise reduces stress, and then if we're not, that's problematic. Just knowing that movement doesn't have to necessarily look like exercise.
Yes.
So I want to talk a little bit about intentional movement for energy. We know that movement can be a powerful way to release stress and boost energy, but it's really important to approach it with flexibility and compassion. So, what are your tips around that?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I think highlighting exercise and movement are two different things too. So, yeah, I have in my journey have shifted to like, yeah, I can respect exercise. I love movement, right? Movement to me is about what feels good in my body. Do I have capacity for this? Am I doing it for me, or am I doing it for a diet? Are really, and am I doing it for fun? And it's something that, again, fills my cup rather than taking it out. So something to be curious about is, yeah, if you're really tired and needing to sleep, and you ate this big meal and you're like, oh, maybe exercise. Yeah, sometimes like it's that if you're making that choice there, it's probably coming from a place of like maybe compensation rather than leaning into what your body's telling you, which is rest, right? So I would even be curious about if you really need to move too, but don't have a lot of energy for that, or time. It's like maybe that looks like yoga, or maybe it looks like going for a walk and being in nature, right? Movement, it can be a lot of different things. It can even be cleaning the house, which can feel really good if it was dirty, maybe, or maybe you hate cleaning. But again, that's what points back to like these are so individual and yeah, not for everyone. So if I'm offering stuff that doesn't make sense, that's okay too. But yeah, movement versus exercise and checking the value behind it too. Am I doing it for me? Am I doing it to feel better, or am I doing it because I think I have to?
Yeah, it's that intention piece. Um, I've been on an interesting movement exercise journey with trying to figure out some pain that I've been
Mm,
experiencing, and I've kind of pulled back from my regular movement physical activity routine. And for me right now, movement actually means um, working with my physiotherapist and working on joint movement. So it's
mm,
like I'm working on the SI joint. And so it's
yeah.
like very small movement, but she's like, it's angry, it's stiff, it's, pissy with you. And so even though it's, doesn't feel vigorous, it's really hard and
Yeah.
it's challenging, but it also provides a lot of relief. And it's something that if I don't address through self care, it will only get worse. So even just pulling back and saying like joint movement, flexibility,
Yes.
um, stretching your muscles is also super important for self care this time of year. I mean, when we're stressed,
Yeah.
we're like this, and that's going to impact your neck, your back, your core, and also your digestive system. We don't think about that. But when we talked about bloating and on day 3, but when our body is stressed out, our organs and all of our digestive system doesn't function properly because they're tense. It's a muscle too. So we have to think about all the aspects of movement, like even just keeping our digestive system moving. So lots to consider when it comes to stress and self-care and taking care of ourselves. But I think those are some great tips that you shared. And we'll wrap it up for today. But thank you, everybody, for joining us on this journey and this talk. And we'll see you at the next day's event. Take care. Bye.